Okay, let's go. Open up. Be back. So just me and Dylan.
I will be back in like 30 seconds.
You don't have a copy? I got it. It's not you. Don't have your copy? What happened? Shoot it. Have a look in that pile of shaftim. It could be in there somewhere. Last one. Yeah. That's yours. Good. All right. So we've completed the introduction of the Ramchal, and he's told us that he's going to very methodically, in a very scientific, logical order, describe for us the fundamentals of Jewish faith and belief and outlook. And the first section is going to be about.
It's really claustrophobic. I think we need a bigger room.
The first section, which is what we're going to start today, is about the fundamentals of the reality of God and the details of what God is. Okay, that starts out. Let's turn over the page and let's go into that. Chelik Rishon, Perek Aleph. Aboirei, with me? Should have these pages numbered, but you work it out what you're up to. Okay, Baboirei Yutzim Tovshin means Yisparach Shemai. We're going to talk about the Creator. His name should be blessed. Aleph. What? Aleph. Metzius Hashem. The existence, the reality of God. Kol Ish Israel, every Jewish person, Tzarich Sheya'amin, must believe, V'yeda, and know. It's interesting that he uses both words, because the Rambam, when he brings this, in some places, in some sources, the Rambam writes Sheyeda, and in some places writes Sheya'amin. The Rambam in Derech Hashem, when he talks about the commandment to the first commandment to know God, the Rambam writes to know. And in other sources, the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvot, the Rambam delineates the 613 commandment, he writes the Ha'amin. And he talks about both. And I think the reason why both are used is because different people from different backgrounds really have different mitzvahs. Meaning, a person who's born religious doesn't really have the mitzvah to believe because he already believes. That was just the way he was brought up. Right? His knowledge of God is through his belief. But he has a mitzvah to investigate and inquire and to substantiate his beliefs that he has brought up on. And a guy who's brought up not from, right? So he becomes, obviously this mitzvah is not referring to him because he doesn't know anything, right? But to become from, he's not going to believe, because why should he believe this? He has to first know. It means he has to be educated and know. Then he can strengthen his knowledge through belief. So depending on who you're talking to, you start with Yediyah and you strengthen it with Emunah, or you start with Emunah and you strengthen it with knowledge. So that's why the Rambam sometimes writes one and sometimes writes the other, and the Ramchal writes both. That's my take on it. Okay. Sheyesham. So what is this obligation? Every Jewish person is obligated, is required to believe and to know Sheyesham. Matsui Rishon Kadmon V'Nitzchi. What do those mean? Sheyesham literally means there is there. Okay? But when we talk about God, there's no place. Place is meaningless. Right? So it's really not really a good, accurate translation. I once saw that it's the best way in Hebrew to say that there exists. Right? And therefore that's why I once saw that apparently it's actually like a translation from the Greek. And in the Greek, it's the right way to say exist, even though you're not referring to a place. So that's what it means. So Yesham, that exists. Matsui means something that exists. Rishon means first. Kadmon means that's always been there. It's not just the first. I mean, God isn't just the first in the sense that he was before everybody else. That's true. But he's also, Kadmon means he's always been there. Kadmon means there's no beginning. The nitzchi, just a minute. Nitzchi means forever, which really means without end. Like Selah, correct, and Va'ed, right? So there exists a reality that is first, that's always been there and always will be there. This is what we're referring to. Another way, this is what we know about God. V'hu, and he, this existence, shehimtzi, who brought into existence, umemtzi, and continues to bring into existence, in the present tense, kol ma shenimtza, everything that exists, b'mitzius, in the reality. Hu ha'elokah baruch hu, that thing that we were describing in those terms is God, blesses he. This thing that exists, that was first, always been there, always will be there, and brought everything else into existence. Okay? Alright, that's up. Base. Shleimuto. Shleimuto means his completeness, which is a bit of a funny word, right? It could be better to describe his perfectness. Okay? It's also important that you should know this being that we've been describing is Baruch Shemai. Ein, it is not, amitas, the truth, mitziusai, of his existence, maseges, which means understood or grasped, lezulosekla. Besides himself, nobody really understands it. Besides God, nobody really understands what we're talking about. So we can say the words, we can say we believe in it, but to really understand what that means, only God knows. So then we can't really talk about it, right? Because only God, that's what I have to say. We really don't have the ability to talk about it properly. What we do know about him, shehu matzui, that he exists, shalem, that he is complete or perfect, b'chol minei shlemos, with all types of perfection, v'lo nimtza bo chisaron klal, there is not in him any deficiencies at all. Now, I think that he's wording it very carefully. He's not saying there's nothing God can't do. You know, this old silly question, can God create a square triangle? Or a triangle with four sides? Or can he create a rock that he can't pick up? Right? No one ever said that God can do everything. That's not what we're saying, because God doesn't have any deficiencies. Right? It's not a deficiency not to be able to be nasty or cruel or create not to be able to make a square triangle. No, it's not a deficiency. Or even to not to be able to pick a rock you can't pick up. That's not a deficiency. It's something you can't do, but it's not a weakness or a lacking. And that's what he said. God has no deficiencies. V'ulam devarim eileh. These things, yedanu. How do we know them then? If we can't really understand God, and only God really understands it, so how do we know it? V'ulam devarim eileh yedanum b'kabbalah min ha'avos or min ha'neviim. We know them as a tradition from our patriarchs and from the prophets.
Is it tradition? Kabbalah is an acceptance.
That's what tradition means. Tradition means something you heard from somebody else. Yeah, the word Kabbalah means to receive, right?
It's not talking about like Kabbalistically, like anything like that, like Kabbalah?
No, I mean the Kabbalah is just a word for a tradition,
Okay.
as opposed to something which is written down. That's all.
Kabbalah isn't written down.
It is now, but it wasn't originally. But the word when Chazal say the word Kabbalah, they don't mean what you mean by the word Kabbalah.
What do I mean by the word Kabbalah?
You mean Tzafas, Arizal, Rabbi Shemaiah. That's what you mean by Kabbalah,
Yeah.
right? Esoteric, right? But that's just a word, right? When the Torah says Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, doesn't mean he got Kabbalah, right? You think it means that, but it doesn't, because you're wrong, right? The word Kabbalah, you know, when you go to a football match, right, and someone's Mekabel the Kadur, it doesn't mean this is something Kabbalistic about it. It just means you receive the ball from there. Right? So when Chazal say the word Kabbalah, Divrei Kabbalah, they mean the words of the prophets. Midivrei Torah, midivrei Kabbalah, lo yalfinon. We don't, or we do, right? Whatever, it's a debate. We don't, or do, understand the interpretation of words in the Torah by analyzing the words of the Navi. That's the Gemara. Divrei Torah, midivrei Kabbalah, lo yalfinon. You have to work it out from itself, not from the words of the Navi. So the words Kabbalah just mean that which you receive from somebody else. And since Kabbalah was the last, what you're talking about is the last thing to be written down. It means when Rabbi Yehuda Nossi wrote down the Mishnah and Ravina Rav Ashi wrote down the Gemara, the esoteric parts of the Chumah, of Judaism were not written down. They're written down much, much, much later, written down in the 15th century. Right? How do you know? No, he didn't write the Zohar. He published the Zohar. It wasn't written down. It wasn't a book.
He wrote down writings.
No, he didn't. How do you know? You've seen them?
No, but I learned that he wrote down.
Maybe they were wrong. Nobody had the book called the Zohar till...
No, but it was compiled from different writings, I thought.
Yes, people over the years wrote down some of the things they heard.
In his final day, nobody was in the room with him when he wrote it down, so that's how I know it had to have been written down, because otherwise nobody would have worked it.
Well, okay. I don't know how anybody knows all of that because nobody was there, so how does anybody know?
Right.
It's just a story. You want to believe a story, you can believe a story, right? But I don't believe that's what happened. I believe that it was tradition. It was just like the Mishnah. Till the times of Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was all off by heart. And the Gemara, till the times of Rabbi Rashi, was all off by heart. The same would be true with every other thing. Why should people... It's not like a strange thing. Why would he write it down? Nothing was written down in those days. Right? There were works published. Even when the Mishnah was published by Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, it wasn't written down according to some. Okay? So eventually, in the 15th century, there was someone who actually wrote it down and published a book and wrote out the Sefer Isaiah. Okay. All right. So I think that's the reason why it was called Kabbalah. Till then, I don't think there's any other reason. All right. So where were we? So this fact that God exists and that God has no deficiencies and God is perfect is something that we have a tradition from our forefathers who were themselves prophets. So how do a prophet know something? That's a completely different way of understanding. We can always work out things either from what we read or from what we logically work out. But people who actually talk to God, who witness God at Har Sinai, as we're going to say in a second, so they know this to be true because of what they saw. The Hisigum and Kol Yisrael, all Israel grasped these concepts which we received from prophets and our forefathers, the Ma'amad Har Sinai at the revelation at Mount Sinai. V'omdu al amitosam, and they understood the truths of these ideas, but they wrote very clearly because they were there when God spoke to them at Har Sinai. Then they understood what they themselves knew from it. The Jews at Har Sinai also had a tradition going back to the patriarchs, but they saw it at Har Sinai. They didn't need to rely on the tradition anymore because they saw it. And then we got it from them, passed down from generation to generation. V'limdum libneiam, and they taught it to their children. Dar achad dar, generation after generation, kayom hazeh, like today. It means Ramchal says, why do we know now in the 16th, 17th century, why do we know these facts? Because we heard them from our ancestors who heard them from those who stood at Har Sinai. Why did they pass it on? Now this abbreviation means Moshe Rabbeinu alav hashalom. Moshe Rabbeinu of blessed, may his soul rest in peace. He commanded us mipi hagvura, by commandment from the Almighty. Hagvura is the Almighty. What did he say? It says this in the pasuk: "Pentishkach es havarim." Be careful not to forget the things that your eyes saw at Mount Sinai. You shall report them to your children, and to your grandchildren. And that's the reason why we know it today, because it was passed on through the generations. However, in truth, also through investigation, with proofs, halimudiyim. Limudim, I suppose, means academic or something like that. Means what I said, we happen to have a tradition, and we can talk based on that tradition. But in truth, he claims that you can prove these things without the tradition. Too, we could prove verify all these things. Yukrach heyoisam kain, and we could prove them to be true U'masigeh, from what we see, asher nachnu roim b'nei, what we see with our own eyes. The world that we see, the universe that we see, the stars and the physics and the science that we see, we could prove these points, and the philosophy, we could prove this as well. Al pi chochmas hakeva, through the wisdom of nature, hahandasa, I'm not sure what that means, like someone translates it as physics, hatachuna, other sciences, ushara chochmas, other wisdoms. Shemehem tilakachno hakdamis hamitish, which you can build fundamental ideas, asher yivaled mehem, that you could learn out from them, birur ha'inyanim ha'amitim, the clarity of these true concepts, without having to rely on tradition, like Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu didn't have any tradition, right? His fathers were pagans, right? And yet he still came to the conclusion on his own. So he's saying you don't necessarily need a tradition. However, we're not going to go into proving that. You could some other books which would go into philosophically prove the existence of God and his perfectness, and he has no deficiencies, and he's always been there, always will be there. All those things you could prove philosophically as well, but we're not going to do that over here because that's not the point of this book. Ella natzia hahakdama islamita. Some we will lay down the facts of these fundamentals which are true. The nastir hadvarim aburim, we will order them clearly. Kafi hamasayres shebadenu, according to the tradition. You see, that's the word tradition, right? The usual one is masayres, right? V'hamafusam b'cholum masayna, which is well known in the whole of the Jewish people. It means all Jews understand these concepts and believe these concepts and receive these ideas from their parents and grandparents going back to Sinai, and therefore that's what we're going to lay them down without having to prove them philosophically. So if you want a philosophical proof for all these things, you have to look somewhere else. That's not the point. He's just laying down what we believe as part of, has always been Jewish belief, right? As Dylan pointed out, it's not that all Jews always believed this. No, that's not true, right? We learn that as we go through Tanakh, we'll see there's lots of times when there was lots of Jews who did it, right? But there are also a large percentage of people who did, and they're the ones who continue to pass a tradition from one generation to the next. Okay, that's it for today, my friends. Derech Hashem. Let's continue with Shoftim. So you guys can learn together.